Good afternoon. Let's do that again. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. We are so delighted that all of you can be here with us today to honor our alumnus, Justice John Paul Stevens. In doing so, we are incredibly honored to be joined by Justice Kagan from the university, our new Northwestern president and professor of law, Michael Schill, on his third day, university provost, Kathleen Haggerty, general counsel, Stephanie Graham, vice presidents Bob McQuinn and Luke Fagora, and other Northwestern leaders as well. We're also delighted that former law school dean Bob Bennett and former interim dean Jim Speta are here with us today as well. And of course, we are so thrilled to welcome Justice John Paul Stevens' family and close friends here with us today, both in person and virtually. I want to acknowledge his daughters and many grandchildren and close friends of the family who are here today. I also need to give a big thank you to Skip Paul, who's a former clerk for the Justice, for his extraordinary leadership in making these events possible. I also want to thank Larry Marshall and Kate Shaw, former clerks, for their leadership, as well as Professor and Law Board member Carter Phillips for his many contributions to the day. And of course, we are incredibly grateful to Alderman Brian Hopkins, who led the effort to do the honorary naming of Chicago Avenue. And then the last but certainly not least thank you is I really want to thank our law school team for their wonderful work in bringing together today's events. They've really done an extraordinary job. So let's welcome and thank. So we are here today to honor our alumnus, Justice John Paul Stevens, for his tremendous contributions to our country and its legal system, as well as to our university. Justice Stevens was born on April 20th, 1920, in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Chicago, and earned a degree in English from the University of Chicago. He served our country during World War II in the Navy, from 1942 to 1945, and earned a Bronze Star as a lieutenant. Following the war, he returned to Chicago, intending to get a graduate degree in English. But fortunately for all of us, one of his older brothers convinced him to attend law school. He enrolled at Northwestern and excelled as a student, earning the highest GPA in our history at the time, and also served as co-editor-in-chief of the Northwestern University Law Review. His impressive career began with clerking for Supreme Court Justice Wiley B. Rutledge, Jr. This clerkship came about, though, bringing the day full circle, because of a coin toss between Justice Stevens and another distinguished alumnus who we just had a named lecture in honor of today with Justice Kagan, Howard Trenez. Justice Stevens won the coin toss and thus got to choose between a 2-year assignment with Chief Justice Fred Vinson and a 1-year assignment with Associate Justice Wiley Rutledge. He opted to work for Justice Rutledge because the shorter assignment would enable him to move into law practice more quickly. After his clerkship, Justice Stevens built his reputation as a top antitrust lawyer, eventually establishing his own law firm in Chicago, while also teaching courses at both our law school and the law school at the University of Chicago. He was nominated to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals by Richard Nixon in 1970, where he served until 1975, when President Gerald Ford nominated him for the United States Supreme Court. The Senate, by the way, confirmed him by a vote of 98-0. 3 decades after nominating him, former President Gerald Ford famously wrote, "I am prepared to allow history's judgment of my term in office to rest, if necessary exclusively, on my nomination 30 years ago of Justice John Paul Stevens to the U.S. Supreme Court." In 2010, after almost 35 years on the bench, Justice Stevens retired. He became the 3rd longest-serving member of the court, and at 90 years old, the 2nd oldest at his time of retirement. He was honored with the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama in 2012. That same year, Justice Stevens also donated his Supreme Court chair to our law school. It was a great honor to have been gifted that chair and a testament of his affection and loyalty to our law school. And then we're incredibly grateful to his family, who've donated a portrait of him that's now displayed next to the chair. Justice Stevens will long be remembered for his many important contributions to the legal profession and Supreme Court jurisprudence, and he will continue to influence generations of lawyers. We are very proud to recognize his impact and achievements in a number of ways at our law school, even prior to this, including the John Paul Stevens Professorship, currently held by Andy Koppelman, who's here with us today, Justice John Paul Stevens Public Interest Fellowship Program, which has helped dozens of our students launch public interest careers, and the John Paul Stevens Prize for Academic Excellence, which each year recognizes the student who graduates at the top of their class. Today, we are officially dedicating this beautiful space, the Justice John Paul Stevens Courtyard. And in addition, as we just finished doing in a smaller ceremony, we will do in an honorary way here, the main thoroughfare in front of the law school in Chicago Avenue will be known as Justice John Paul Stevens Way. So let's take a moment and celebrate this honoring. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, President and Professor of Law Michael Schill. President Schill took office as Northwestern's 17th president this Monday, and we are so honored that he is able to join us today. We are also delighted that he's a member of our law faculty as a professor of law. President Schill previously spent 7 years as president of the University of Oregon, where he raised the university's profile in teaching, research, innovation, student access, and diversity. Prior to that, he served as dean and professor at University of Chicago and UCLA's law schools, and also held tenured faculty positions at New York University and the University of Pennsylvania. President Schill is a nationally recognized expert in property, real estate, and housing law and policy, and he's the co-author of 3 books and over 40 scholarly articles. His casebook Property, co-authored with James Creer and Greg Alexander, is among the most widely adopted casebooks in U.S. law schools. He served on several nonprofit boards and civic bodies, including Argonne National Laboratory, Ithaca, the Chicago Innovation Exchange, and the Housing Preservation Compact of Chicago. He graduated in 1980 with an AB in Public Policy from Princeton University and a JD from Yale Law School. And in addition to these many professional accomplishments, I just wanted to say something a little bit more personal, which is that President Schill has been a really important mentor for so many law deans, law professors, and law students, including members of our Northwestern community. And I personally am very grateful for his leadership mentoring at key points in my career. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to President Schill.
Well, there it goes. So it's a little wet. So thank you, Hari. Thank you for those lovely comments. While you have only been the dean of Northwestern Pritzker School of Law for a relatively short period of time, I think you just are over a year as dean, you have already made a tremendous difference. Your passion, your creativity, your love for the color purple, they will make you, I predict, one of the greatest deans this school has ever had. And it also doesn't hurt that you got your PhD from the University of Oregon. I just want to say how thrilled I am to be here today. I am just delighted to honor Justice Stevens, to welcome my friend, Justice Kagan, both of whom have so honorably served our country. I'm also excited to be here at Northwestern serving as the 17th president of this incredible institution. How great a place is this? It's day 3, and I'm already celebrating 2 of the greatest legal minds in our country's history. And to top it off, I am now a professor of law at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. It's really been quite a week, and it's only Wednesday. I want to thank you all. Thank you for being here today. I'd like to take a moment to recognize several people who are with us today. Justice Stevens' daughters, Elizabeth Seisman and Susan Stevens Mullen, as well as his granddaughter, Hannah Mullen. And I want to also recognize Justice Kagan and Alderman Brian Hopkins. Thank you for joining us. It is truly humbling to be here today at our law school, which has been such a leader in innovative education and scholarship. From the time I was dean at that other law school on the South Side, I was always really impressed by Northwestern Pritzker's cutting-edge interdisciplinary scholarship and academic programs that addressed major societal challenges and prepared students to lead. Our law school's deep commitment to social justice, it dates back to Dean Wigmore and is embodied in our impressive Bloom Legal Clinic and Public Interest Center. Our extraordinary alumni, great alumni, have made so many just incredible contributions to our community, to our nation, and to our world. And this is just perfect for us today to be celebrating Justice Stevens, who personifies impact. It is also so fitting that we are honoring Justice Stevens both through the dedication of our courtyard and through an honorary street naming. He's not only one of the most distinguished alumni who, as Dean of South Peak shared, made so many important contributions to society and the legal profession, but also had deep and abiding ties to the city of Chicago and the Chicago metropolitan region. It was wonderful to see the chair from his judicial chambers. It was a thrill to see the portrait displayed here in our law school. We are grateful to Justice Stevens and his family for donating them to us. This courtyard is such a lovely setting for our community to come together and honor Justice Stevens' legacy. We're also grateful to Skip Paul and the other clerks for their leadership and planning that made today possible. Now, Justice Stevens' legacy lives on. It lives on in part through the work of Justice Kagan, who was appointed to the Supreme Court in 2010 and was appointed into the seat that was previously occupied by Justice Stevens. Now, Justice Kagan and I have crossed paths several times in our respective lives. I first met Elena when we were students at Princeton a long time ago, probably too long time ago. We were both involved with the Daily Princetonian. She was much more impressive than I was. She was a star reporter and editorial writer, and I was, I can't even remember what I was. I think I was comptroller, because at the time I knew I wanted to go to law school, so wanted to get something on my resume, but she's the real deal. Then fast forward to 2000. Justice Kagan and I were visiting professors at the Harvard Law School, and we shared meals and gossip. She went on to serve as dean of that great law school, and I became the dean of UCLA Law School. Although Harvard outranked UCLA by quite a bit, she always made me feel part of the in-group of deans, and that was really generous. Thank you. Now, I also am indebted to Justice Kagan, whose confirmation testimony informed the world why Chinese food is so important to me. Now I just say, where's our Chinese restaurant? And they say, I understand. Elena Kagan is an extraordinary voice of reason on our Supreme Court. She is also a genuinely wonderful human being, brilliant, funny, authentic, sincere, and warm. What a great combination of virtues. I am so delighted that our paths cross again here as we honor Justice Stevens. Thank you all. Want to make sure we have a dry podium for you.
Thank you, President Schill. And it is indeed very dry. I very much appreciate his remarks, and I'm honored to next introduce Hannah Mullen, who's Justice John Paul Stevens' granddaughter. She also is a lawyer. She graduated magna cum laude from Harvard Law School in 2019. She's currently a staff attorney at the Council on American Islamic Relations Legal Defense Fund, and has a deep interest in public interest appellate litigation, federal courts, and constitutional law. We are so honored to have Hannah and other members of Justice Stevens' family with us here today. And so I ask you all to please join me in welcoming Hannah Mullen.
Hello. On behalf of the Stevens family, including my Aunt Liz, my mother Sue, my cousin John, and all of my Stevens side cousins, I'd like to welcome everyone here today and say thank you to Northwestern Pritzker for this fantastic bust and this beautiful courtyard. I know that's a little bit of a spoiler because we haven't unveiled it yet, but the family got a sneak peek and it really is wonderful. It's an honor to be here with Justice Kagan, with President Schill, with Provost Haggerty, Alderman Hopkins, and all of you. We'd like to thank three of my grandfather's former clerks, Skip Paul, who's with us today, as well as Larry Marshall and Kate Shaw. It means so much to the family that his clerks love him and are dedicated to celebrating his legacy, and we're grateful to you for everything you've done to make this day possible. We'd also like to recognize the faculty and staff at Northwestern who were involved in this effort, particularly Dean Osofsky, Associate Dean Hines, Christine Brieke, and Stephanie Smith for all of the time, energy, and resources that they have spent to create this beautiful space. We'd also like to thank Carter Phillips for being here to share this special day with us. And finally, thank you to Professor Len Rabinowitz, who has been a huge and critical supporter of the John Paul Stevens Foundation since its infancy, and who has been key to the program's success throughout the decades. I love, yes. I love that Northwestern chose to honor my grandfather with a courtyard. His legacy is perfectly suited to a place to gather together for vibrant discussion and debate, rather than the quiet individual study that characterizes so much of a law student's time. Grandpa believed that justice and equality were best sought through humble, respectful, persistent inquiry. Take, for example, the way he ran his chambers. Unlike most judges, Grandpa didn't assign his clerks to prepare written bench memos. Instead, his clerks would read the case materials and then sit in Grandpa's office, where they would talk through the facts and the legal issues, sometimes for hours. He'd ask the clerks hard questions, poking and prodding at our theories of the case, subjecting each issue to careful scrutiny. He took a similar approach when asking questions from the bench. Grandpa wasn't the most frequent questioner on the court, but when he broke in, usually prefacing his inquiry with his signature Midwestern polite introduction, which Justice Kagan referenced earlier today, "May I please ask a question?" He cut to the heart of the case. As former Solicitor General Paul Clement recalled, his questions often started with an unassuming and gentle lead-in and ended with the lawyer conceding his or her case without even realizing it. I have my own memories of being the subject of Grandpa's kind yet incisive questioning. When I enrolled in law school, Grandpa began giving me law review articles to read so we could talk about them over his morning cup of coffee. He also loved to ask what cases I was reading that week, listening carefully before he pounced. "What do you think of the majority's theory of standing? That concurrence was ridiculous, don't you agree?" My insights were often not as sparkling as his own. I adored our intergenerational brainstorming sessions. Grandpa asked what I thought and he listened, even though I knew so little. I wasn't being cold called by a superior. Rather, we were embarking together on a joyful quest for the right answer. I hope that this courtyard is the site of many joyful quests for the right answer. I hope that, like Grandpa, the intellectual combatants and collaborators are respectful without pulling any punches. I hope that they push each other to question their assumptions and that they challenge each other's ideas while reconsidering their own. I can't think of a better way to honor Grandpa.
Thank you, Hannah, for those wonderful remarks. You know, many of you know I'm quite fond of saying that our law students give me hope for the future. When we get to see a lawyer like Hannah, I think it should give us all hope for the future. I now have the great honor and pleasure of introducing Carter Phillips, who's one of the most experienced and successful Supreme Court and appellate lawyers in the country. He's actually argued in front of the Supreme Court more than anyone else in private practice. He graduated with his master's in Northwestern in 1975 and his JD in 1977. He's a partner and chair emeritus and serves as an adjunct professor at the law school, doing incredibly important work here in the advocacy work that he does. He's also a dedicated alumnus and member of the Northwestern Pritzker School of Law Board. And I can tell you very clearly that he provides really important leadership and wise counsel in that role. I've been incredibly grateful to both him and his wife, Sue Henry, for their warm welcome and their generosity this year, and more broadly to our school. And I also want to note we're particularly grateful for Carter's leadership in making Justice Kagan's visit possible. So please join me in welcoming Carter Phillips to the podium.
Obviously, I had no say in the decision as to how the speakers were going to be ordered, because the idea of following Justice Stevens' granddaughter, who gave me goosebumps, and being ahead of Justice Kagan is not at the top of the list of responsibilities I would have sought. I think maybe I would have been the early speaker, maybe when they were doing the road or something like that. But instead, I'm here to make an observation or two about someone whom I admired greatly. I had the privilege of arguing in front of Justice Stevens 65 times. I won't tell you how often he voted on my side, but Hannah, I can tell you he had a fairly skeptical view of at least some of the arguments that I made over the years. What every member of the Supreme Court bar and anyone who follows the Supreme Court will and should take away from Justice Stevens' tenure on the court was the extraordinary combination of brilliance, which I think Justice Kagan mentioned today, but the just wonderful decency about him. And that was manifested as much in the oral arguments as it was in every other context. But one of my absolute favorite stories about Justice Stevens is at one oral argument, and it goes to the core of why I will remember him the best, because in my view, he was always the best hypothetical questioner on the Supreme Court. And Justice Kagan doing a nice job in following his footsteps, but he still had a lot more experience, so he was pretty good at this. And there was a case involving Jerry Tarkanian, the coach at the University of Nevada at Las Vegas, against the NCAA. And the issue in the case was, well, what happened was, most of you probably remember that the coach, Tarkanian, violated a lot of NCAA regulations and ultimately got pressed out of service as the coach at the university. And as anybody who's done wrong in this country does, he of course sued. And he didn't want to sue UNLV, which is a state actor. He wanted to sue the NCAA, which is a private operation. But he wanted to sue them under the Civil Rights Act, Section 1983, which requires state action. So the issue in the case was whether or not the relationship between the NCAA and the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, was such that the NCAA could be regarded as a state actor. Justice Scalia asked Coach Tarkanian's lawyer the following hypothetical, which fits here because we're in Chicago, and he says, let's talk about O'Hare Airport. And he says, if you have the airport, which is a government operation, and United Airlines decides that they don't like the woman who's running their concourses, and so United Airlines goes and says, if you don't fire her, we're going to take all of our airplanes and move them to Midway Airport. Under your theory of the case, would United Airlines be a state actor? Coach Tarkanian's lawyer responded in exactly this way. And actually, if you listen to the transcript of the argument, it goes on like this. And it goes on for a while in that vein until Justice Scalia leans forward and says, the answer you're looking for is no. And the lawyer very quietly says, no, Your Honor. And then Justice Stevens looks at him and says, why? And he looks over at Justice Scalia, who says, no, you're on your own now. Anyway, the number of times I saw Justice Scalia ask a question where the lawyer's expression told you, I have no idea what the right answer is, but I know if I say the wrong answer, this case is lost. You can't count them. He was just that brilliant and that insightful, and he could put together the arguments in such a wonderful way, and it made it a real challenge to be an advocate before the court, but it made it such a wonderful experience. I miss Justice Stevens a lot. I'm sure the court has missed him as well. But this is a wonderful tribute to him. This is a space that I don't think has ever been used nearly as much as it should have, and I believe with all this fundamental change, hopefully the students will get all of the use out of it that they should, and more importantly, will remember Justice Stevens as the extraordinary alum that he was, and to follow his example as they go forward in their legal careers. It's a pleasure to be here today, and almost a pleasure to be in front of Justice Kagan as a speaker. Thank you so much.
So I want to thank Carter Phillips for those wonderful remarks, and also acknowledge, I believe you're wearing Justice Stevens' bow tie. Is that correct? Yeah. Which is just a little special touch in today. It's now my great honor to introduce U.S. Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan. It's so meaningful to have her with us today for so many reasons, but particularly right now because she was the justice who succeeded Justice Stevens. As we talked about earlier, she's a path-breaking legal leader who has made and continues to make extraordinary contributions. She made them as a legal scholar and dean, and she has made them in her public service. And for me and so many members of our Northwestern community and our broader society, she really serves as just such a role model for how one commits to this career in law and advances justice in the work. Justice Kagan was born and raised in New York City and graduated from Princeton University, as we've heard, the University of Oxford, and Harvard Law School. After Harvard, she clerked for Judge Abner Mikva of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and then for Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. After working at the Washington, D.C. law firm of Williams and Connolly, Justice Kagan became a law professor, first at the University of Chicago and later at Harvard Law School. And she really made important scholarly contributions to our understanding of the administrative state and of interbranch dynamics. She also served for 4 years in the Clinton administration as associate counsel to the president and then as deputy assistant to the president for domestic policy. Between 2003 and 2009, Justice Kagan served as dean of Harvard Law School. And in 2009, President Obama nominated her as the Solicitor General of the United States. A year later, President Obama nominated her as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, and she took her seat on August 7th, 2010. Justice Stevens was reported as saying, "Thanks to Elena, I have never regretted my decision to retire." It's particularly special to have her here today, and please join me in welcoming her to the podium.
Oh, please sit down. Thank you, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here for this great event. Dean Osofsky, today is the first day we've met, but I can see that Northwestern is in great hands and that your leadership will be viewed as inspirational for many, many years to come. President Schill, it's great to call you President Schill. We do go back a long, long way. Mike and I were reminiscing about the fact that we were deans together, and the deans kind of know you kind of know which other deans bring value to the table, which other deans to pick up the phone to and say, what do you think about this hard problem? And Mike, I don't know if it was an in-group, it was just, Mike was one of the people who I thought gave really wise advice. So Northwestern is lucky to have him. Carter, I could have told you do not follow Hannah Mullen, all right? Carter, it's a hard assignment. You did it admirably, Carter is one of the great Supreme Court advocates of our day. We have a great Supreme Court bar, and Carter is an important leader of that bar. The bow tie made me think. I have two good friends who are John Paul Stevens clerks, who are now federal judges. One of them is David Barron, who just became the chief judge of the First Circuit, and another is Allie Nathan, who has served with great distinction on the Southern District of New York, and who I just participated in her investiture for the Second Circuit. And there was a moment at Harvard Law School, this was after I left, and after Justice Stevens retired from the bench, where Harvard had asked Justice Stevens to come and participate in a moot court celebration. And the two other judges for the moot court, this is the big event of the year, the two other judges were David and Allie, and they both walked out wearing bow ties, which of course Justice Stevens was as well, as one silly but maybe meaningful mark of their veneration for him. Hannah Mullen, first of all, the entire Stevens family is so extraordinary. He was so proud of you, as you are of him. You honored me once before. This was a very this was a very Stevens-esque thing to do, I think. When Justice Stevens died, there had to the family had to make a decision about who was going to speak at the Supreme Court event to mark his passing, the Supreme Court part of his funeral. And you know, I have to think. I have to think that this. It's like, well, who do you pick? Because if you pick one colleague rather than another colleague, it kind of suggests that, oh, you know, that was his best friend on the court or something like that. And so they did this very Stevens-esque thing, which is they said, well, we'll just pick a successor, the person who never served with him at all. It was an extraordinary honor. I had argued with him, which I'm going to talk about, argued in front of him, which I'm going to talk about a little bit because my experience was pretty similar to Carter's. But I want to thank the family for honoring me by asking me to speak on a couple of important occasions about Justice Stevens and honoring him. Hannah, you especially, he was proud of all his grandchildren. I'm going to say because you know, were going to law school and because we heard a little bit more about you than maybe we heard about your cousins. And there was a moment, and this strikes me as akin to the may I ask a question moment, okay? So this is the way the story goes. I go up to lunch and John Stevens is there, and I say, John, great to see you. You know, sometimes John was in the building after he retired, sometimes not. It had been a while since I had seen him. Great to see you. What's going on? What's happening? You know, we talked a little. He said, and he said, there's another thing. He said, my granddaughter, Hannah, you know, she goes to Harvard Law School. And I said, yeah, I had heard that. And you know, I was once dean of Harvard, right? And Hannah was going to Harvard. And he said, I was trying to figure out these grades that she got. Are they good? And then he sort of told me what her first semester grades were. And I said, yeah, John, they're like, that's not just good, that's like jaw-dropping, you know? But he was super proud of you, Hannah. But the thing is, it's you know, I mean, that was like what he would really be proud of. It's not your grades. What he would really be proud of is the contribution you've already made in the legal profession and the contribution that you're going to make in the legal profession. You're going to do a lot of justice by the time you're done. And he would be thrilled to see how you're using your extraordinary legal talents, which is just as important as having them as using them. And he would be super proud. John Stevens. I mean, the first word that comes to mind has got to be independence. I think he was, and maybe it comes to mind faster than any modern Supreme Court justice. There was a time, and I said this earlier today in my conversation with the dean, there was a time early in his tenure where people sort of said, what is it about this Stevens guy? You know, he's a little bit idiosyncratic, isn't he? And maybe maybe a little bit quirky or something. And that talk, there was a lot of that talk in the first few years. And then it stopped pretty much because people, as they watched him, they thought, you know, the other term for this is he just thinks through everything from square one, and he doesn't really care who thinks what. And if what he thinks is kind of different from what other folks are thinking at the time, if what he thinks, you know, is like, no, there's just a different way of looking at this, then he's going to say it. And so those early concurrences and dissents and continuing on, and it was just a marker of this extraordinary independence of judgment and of thought. Now he was also, I mean, if independence is word one, as Carter said, brilliance is word two. I mean, you have to be kind of brilliant to have this kind of independence. Because if you think about it, it's like this kind of independence involves thinking a lot of new thoughts, you know? It involves a certain kind of creativity. It involves sparks flying. It involves being able to see things in slightly different ways, or maybe more than slightly different ways than everybody else has. And Justice Stevens was nothing if not brilliant in this sort of, not just, he was brilliant analytically. He was brilliant in the kind of law chopping, doctrine chopping way that great law students, law professors, whatever lawyers are. But he was also brilliant in this kind of astonishingly creative way. The court saw that over and over and over again. Now, as I suggested earlier, and I'll tell you that I actually suggested this at this earlier occasion when I was asked to speak at Justice Stevens' funeral, because in that occasion there was limited seating, and a lot of the seating had been given over, properly so, reflecting Justice Stevens' own values, to his former clerks. And I had been a clerk when Justice Stevens was a justice, so he had been a justice for a number of years when I was a clerk for Justice Marshall. And we used to wonder a little bit what the Justice Stevens clerks were doing, really. There were only 2 of them. There were 4 of everybody else. Or I think the Chief Justice had 3 clerks because it fit with his, he used his clerks to play tennis with. So he could only have 3 because what would a 4th do? But Justice Stevens had 2 clerks because I don't think he could really think of anything else to do with more of them. And in truth, we thought, it's like, what even do those 2 do? Because Justice Stevens drafted his own opinions from scratch, and he read all the bench memos, He just picked up, he read all the cert petitions. He just picked up a pile of cert petitions and worked his way through them. And as somebody said, I forget who, he never asked anybody for bench memos. So, I mean, this was pretty much the most self-reliant justice that there's ever been. And he could be that because he just had this kind of mental processing speed that kind of puts everybody to shame. Now, you wouldn't expect a guy this brilliant to be as decent, as humble, as unassuming as he indeed was. I was looking over this afternoon, one of my clerks, who I actually do give assignments to, one of my clerks had put together a book for me. And the book was basically a bunch of pieces that different people had written about Justice Stevens. And David Barron's piece starts by saying something like, everybody has one. And the one is everybody has a Justice Stevens being unassuming story. And then, David goes on to tell a bunch of these. And then as I was looking at all the other pieces in the book, in fact, everybody does have one of these, Justice Stevens, just decent, unassuming. I'm just a guy, I happen to be wearing these robes, but it's, you and me, and I could be down on my hands and knees plugging in the computer just as easily as you could, which is David Barron's unassuming story, not being able to figure out how to put the disk drive in, and Justice Stevens just doing it. But this sort of unassumingness, this sort of politeness, carried over into everything he did, the way he treated his clerks, but also the way he treated counsel at argument. I was Solicitor General in Justice Stevens' last year on the bench, and so I got a taste of this, and it's pretty well. First off, this kind of may I ask a question, which really nobody has used that frame, those words on the Supreme Court bench since Justice Stevens retired. Paul Clement tells me that he was once arguing, and Justice Stevens said, may I ask what's probably a dumb question? And and Paul Clements said, at that moment, I knew the jig was up, my case was over. But I have to say, like, can you imagine, Carter? Can you imagine any of us saying, "May I ask a stupid question"? I mean, I just don't think it would happen. But you know, as Carter suggested, the "May I ask the questions," believe me, were never stupid. There was always this kind of, you know, I killed your case at the end of it. And you know, I remember one of the really fun things about being Solicitor General is sort of sometimes you're arguing from one side so that half the bench, I felt, came at me, and sometimes you're arguing for the other side so that the other half of the bench came at you. So my first argument, Justice Scalia came at me. My first argument was Citizens United, and Justice Scalia started the argument by saying, I got out about 2 sentences, and Justice Scalia said, wait, and then proceeded to sort of tear apart my first sentence. I loved arguing in front of Justice Scalia, absolutely adored it, but it was that kind of like, boom, you know? My second argument, Justice Stevens was my leading interlocutor, and Justice Stevens, this was one where he didn't wait till the end. This was one where he had just decided to throw me off from the very beginning, you know? And it was this kind of, may I ask a question? And I'm just a humble country lawyer. And then he just sort of tore my case to bits. So really, when I got out, I didn't know what was left. So here's the greatest thing that Justice Stevens ever did for me. He gave me the best piece of advice or wisdom that I've ever been given, and I talked about this morning too. Justice Stevens, when I came onto the court, when he left the court, he was 90 years old. He had already served for 35 years. You would have thought maybe at that stage you're kind of set in your ways. You're kind of doing things the way you've done them. It's nothing new under the sun. And I asked Justice Stevens, you know, what is it that, like, what is it I should be thinking about? And he said, the way I did this job is, he said, I tried to think of it as just a constant opportunity to learn. Every day, every week, every month, every year, you can learn something new. And the meaning that had for me, coming from this person who had been in the same job for 35 years and said, every day you can learn something new. You don't have it all figured out. Every day you can see a different perspective. Every day you can find out that there's a better way to do something. That kind of open-mindedness, that kind of ability to sort of realize that even though you've seen a lot, you don't know it all, was the best thing that anybody could have said to me. And I am sure that I fail the Justice Stevens test in lots of ways, but that's what I aspire to every day, is every day to keep that open-mindedness, to keep that sense of the capacity to learn something new, to see something a different way, and I'll always be grateful to him for that. Justice Stevens was a great patriot. He was a great citizen of this country. He was a great citizen of this city. And he was a great alumnus of Northwestern Law School, which meant an enormous amount to him. It's really tremendous that Northwestern is honoring him in this way, and I'm very happy that I could be a part of it. Thank you all.
So thank you, Justice Kagan, for sharing those incredible remembrances of Justice Stevens and also reinforcing that importance that we get to greater justice through that open-mindedness and learning that I think is so critical for us to think about in a university and our society more broadly. I also just want to thank all of the speakers for their remembrances of such a remarkable individual. It's just so wonderful to have his family, his friends, his colleagues all together to honor Justice Stevens' life and his very important legacy. So we're now at the point in the ceremony in which we will unveil the bust and the street sign. And I would like to invite the following people to help me do so. And I think we're all going to be right there. So Justice Kagan, President Schill, Provost Haggerty, Justice Stevens' daughters, Sue Mullen and Liz Sessamon, we were so glad to have today, and Hannah and other family members who are here today. If everyone can come forward, and we're going to do this very exciting unveiling of the bus. So, does everyone have a piece? Great. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. It is my official pleasure to welcome you to the Justice John Paul Stevens Courtyard. Now, earlier today, in a small ceremony with Justice Stevens' family, we unveiled the official street sign on Chicago Avenue with a few of Justice Stevens' family members. I really want to encourage everyone to go out to Chicago Avenue and see it. But as you know, Justice Stevens grew up in Chicago. He went to law school here. He practiced here and, of course, was a lifelong Cubs fan. So given his ties to both the city and the law school, it's quite fitting that Chicago Avenue in front of the law school will now be known as Justice John Paul Stevens Way. So what you're seeing here is a copy of the actual street sign that's now on Chicago Avenue. And we have copies to give to the family members so that you each can have one as well. We just want to give a big thank you again to all of you for being here, and especially to our incredible speakers today. For this wonderful celebration of the incredible contributions of Justice John Paul Stevens. Thank you, everyone, for being here.